The Zirathi Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They were old when humans were still living in caves. They were powerful when humans were still learning to make fire. Their ships numbered in the millions. Their soldiers were without count. And their pride was greater than any star in the galaxy. The Zirathi were tall creatures with scales like dark green armor. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light of their ships. They had claws that could tear through metal and teeth that could crush bone. But their greatest weapon was not their bodies. It was their belief that they could never be defeated. For 12,000 years, no one had proven them wrong. When their long-range sensors found Earth, they did what they always did. They sent a ship to deliver terms of surrender. It was a simple process they had repeated hundreds of times. They would arrive. They would make demands. The weaker species would kneel. And the Zirathi Empire would grow larger. The ship they sent was called the Dominion. It was 3 miles long and bristled with weapons that could turn cities to ash. When it appeared in Earth's sky, the whole world stopped to watch. News channels showed the massive vessel hovering above the clouds. People gathered in the streets and looked up with fear in their eyes. Daniel Hart was eating breakfast when he got the call. He was 53 years old with gray hair and a face that had seen too many hard days. He'd been a Marine for 20 years before joining the diplomatic service. He had talked down terrorists and negotiated hostage releases in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. But nothing had prepared him for this. "They want a representative," said the voice on the phone. It was the Secretary General of the United Nations. "They want someone to come aboard their ship and hear their terms." "We chose you." Daniel set down his coffee cup. "Why me?" "Because you don't scare easy. And right now, we need someone who won't wet their pants when they see what's waiting up there." Daniel looked out his window at the sky. He could see the dark shape of the alien ship, even from his apartment in New York. It blocked out the sun like a bad omen. "When do I leave?" he asked. "There's a shuttle waiting for you. You have 1 hour." Daniel hung up the phone and stood there for a long moment. He thought about his daughter who lived in California with her husband and 2 kids. He thought about his ex-wife, who still sent him birthday cards even though they had been divorced for 15 years. He wondered if he would ever see any of them again. Then he put on his best suit and walked out the door. The shuttle ride to the alien ship took less than 30 minutes. Daniel sat in silence as Earth grew smaller in the window behind him. 2 military officers sat with him, but they had nothing to say. What could anyone say at a time like this? The Dominion swallowed their tiny shuttle like a whale swallowing a minnow. They passed through massive doors and landed in the hangar bay that could have held a football stadium. Everywhere Daniel looked, he saw alien soldiers in dark armor. Watching them with cold yellow eyes, a creature stepped forward to greet them. It was taller than the others, wearing robes of deep purple and gold. Its scales were darker, almost black, and it moved with the confidence of something that had never known fear. "I am High Ambassador Vorath," the creature said. Its voice came through a small device on its chest that translated its words into English. "You will follow me." Daniel nodded and walked behind the alien. The military officers tried to come with him, but Vorath raised a clawed hand. "Only the representative. The others will wait here." Daniel looked back at the officers and gave them a small nod. Then he followed Vorath alone into the heart of the ship. They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were lined with banners and flags from worlds Daniel had never heard of. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Each one represented a species that has surrendered to the Zirathi Empire. Each one was a reminder of how small and young humanity really was. Finally, they reached a massive chamber at the center of the ship. It was built to impress and intimidate. Holographic displays showed the Empire's military might. Fleets of warships. Armies of soldiers. Weapons that could crack planets in half. Everything was designed to make visitors feel helpless and afraid. Vareth took his place on a raised platform and looked down at Daniel with obvious contempt. Around them, dozens of Zirathi officials watched in silence. "You have been granted a great honor," Vareth said. "You are the first of your kind to stand before a representative of the Zirathi Empire. You should be grateful." Daniel said nothing. He stood with his hands at his sides and waited. Vareth continued. "Your species has been observed for some time. You are primitive, violent. You fight among yourselves like animals. But you have shown some small potential for usefulness. The Empire has decided to offer you a place among our subjects." He waved a claw, and a holographic document appeared in the air between them. It was written in both Zirathi script and English. "These are our terms. You will surrender all military weapons and vehicles. You will provide 40% of your population for labor redistribution across our colonies. You will accept permanent governance under Zirathi law. And you will pay tribute to the Empire for the rest of your existence." Vareth smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "You have 7 of your Earth days to comply. If you refuse, we will reduce your world to rubble and take what we want anyway. The choice is yours." Daniel looked at the document floating in front of him. He read every word carefully. Then he looked up at Vareth. "And what happens to the people you take?" he asked. "The 40%? Vareth shrugged. "They will serve. Some will work in our mines. Some will build our ships. Some will fight in our armies against other species who resist. It is a great honor to serve the Empire." "Sounds like slavery to me," Daniel said quietly. Vareth's eyes narrowed. "You would be wise to watch your tongue, human. You stand in the presence of beings far superior to yourself. Your opinion means nothing here." Daniel nodded slowly. He had expected this. Earth's intelligence agencies had spent years intercepting Zirathi communications and studying their methods. They knew exactly how this species treated the worlds it conquered. They knew about the slave camps and the mass executions. They knew about the cultural erasure and the forced breeding programs, that they also knew things the Zirathi did not expect them to know. "Before I give you our answer," Daniel said, reaching into his coat pocket, "I would like you to review something." He pulled out a small data chip and held it up. Vareth stared at it with confusion. "What is that?" The High Ambassador demanded. Daniel smiled for the first time since he had arrived. "This is everything we know about your empire. I think you will find it very interesting." He stepped forward and offered the chip to Vareth. The alien hesitated for a moment, then snatched it from Daniel's hand with a snarl. "Very well," Vareth said. "I will humor you. But know this, human. No matter what tricks you think you have, nothing will change what is about to happen to your world. The Zirathi Empire has never been defeated. And we never will be." Daniel clasped his hands behind his back and waited. He watched as Vareth inserted the chip into the ship's computer system. He watched as the holographic displays changed from images of military might to something very different, and he watched as the color drained from Vareth's face. The first part of humanity's response had been delivered. Now the real negotiation would begin. Vareth stared at the screens with wide eyes. His claws gripped the edge of his console so hard that the metal began to bend. Around him, his advisors leaned forward with growing alarm on their faces. The data chip had been small enough to fit in a human pocket, but the information it contained was enough to shake the foundations of an empire. "This is impossible," Vareth whispered. "This cannot be real." Daniel Hart stood calmly in the center of the chamber, his hands still clasped behind his back. He watched the Zirathi officials scramble to understand what they were seeing. He felt a small sense of satisfaction, but he did not let it show on his face. The game was far from over. "I assure you," Daniel said, Everything you are looking at is very real. The screen showed intelligence reports that should have been impossible for any primitive species to obtain. There were detailed maps of Zarathi military installations. There were transcripts of private communications between high-ranking officials. There were financial records showing the true state of the Empire's economy. And that economy was not as strong as the Zarathi wanted the galaxy to believe. Vorath scrolled through the data with trembling claws. He found reports about the rebellion brewing in the Kef sector, where 3 conquered species had been secretly building weapons for the past century. He found documents about the resource shortages that were slowly strangling the outer colonies. He found records of the assassination attempt on Emperor Zithos that had been covered up and erased from all official histories. How did you obtain this information? Vorath demanded, spinning around to face Daniel. You have no ships capable of reaching our space. You have no technology advanced enough to break our codes. How is this possible? Daniel allowed himself a small smile. You made it possible. Your empire has grown lazy over the past few thousand years. You broadcast your communications across open channels because you never imagined anyone would be listening. You leave your computer networks unguarded because you never considered that a younger species might be clever enough to infiltrate them. He took a step forward, and several Zarathi guards raised their weapons. Daniel ignored them. For 15 years, he continued, humanity has been watching you. We intercepted your signals. We decoded your languages. We mapped your territories and studied your weaknesses. While you were looking down on us as primitive animals, we were learning everything about you. Vorath's yellow eyes burned with anger and fear. Even if this is true, knowledge alone will not save your world. We have weapons that could destroy your entire solar system in a matter of hours. You cannot fight us, can we not? Daniel replied. He gestured toward the holographic display. May I? Vorath hesitated, then nodded sharply. Daniel walked to the console and began pulling up new files from the data chip. The screens filled with images that made the Zarathi officials gasp. These are the locations of your 12 primary fleet staging areas, Daniel said, pointing to a star map. Red dots appeared across the galaxy, each one marking a massive military installation. These are the supply routes that feed your core worlds. Without these routes, your homeworld would starve within 3 cycles. He pulled up another image. These are the structural weaknesses in your Dyson collectors. Your entire civilization runs on the energy harvested from captured stars. If someone were to sabotage these collectors in the right way, the resulting cascade failure would shut down power to half your empire. Vorath shook his head. You could not possibly strike at these targets. Your ships are too slow. Your weapons are too weak. Daniel smiled. That is what we wanted you to believe. He pulled up one final image. It showed a ship unlike anything the Zarathi had ever seen. It was human in design, sleek and angular, painted black to blend with the darkness between stars. It hung in space near a Zarathi military station, completely undetected. This is the ESV Defiance, Daniel said. It is a stealth warship designed specifically to operate in your territory without being seen. It carries enough antimatter warheads to crack a planet's crust wide open. He zoomed out, and more dots appeared on the map. 47 in total. The Defiance is one of 47 such ships that we have deployed throughout your empire over the past 3 years. Each one is positioned at a critical target. Each one is crewed by men and women who are prepared to die for their world. And each one is waiting for a single command from Earth. The chamber fell completely silent. Not a single Zarathi moved or spoke. They stared at the human standing before them as if seeing him for the first time. Vorath's voice came out as a dry rasp. You are bluffing. You must be bluffing. Am I? Daniel asked. You detected our shuttle approaching your ship. Did you detect anything else in your space recently? Any unexplained sensor readings? Any strange energy signatures that your technicians could not explain? He could see the doubt growing in Varth's eyes. The High Ambassador turned to one of his officers and barked a command in the Zirathi language. The officer rushed to a console and began checking records. There have been anomalies, the officer admitted reluctantly. Small readings near several key installations. We assumed they were sensor errors. They were not errors, Daniel said. They were my ships watching you, learning your patrol routes, finding the gaps in your defenses, and positioning themselves for the moment when we would need them. Vorath turned back to Daniel with a look of hatred on his scaled face. Why are you telling us this? If you truly have such power, why reveal it? Why not simply strike and destroy us? It was a fair question, and Daniel had prepared his answer carefully. Because we are not monsters, he said simply. We do not want war. We do not want to destroy your civilization or murder billions of innocent beings. We want to live in peace on our own world, free from your control. He stepped closer to Varth, close enough that the guards shifted nervously. But make no mistake, Daniel continued, his voice growing harder. If you force us to fight, we will fight. And we will not stop until one of us is destroyed. That is the choice you face. You can leave Earth alone and lose nothing but your pride. Or you can attack us and lose everything. Vorath bared his teeth. The Zirathi Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. We do not bow to threats from primitives. Then you will die, Daniel said flatly. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, we will tear your empire apart piece by piece. Every world you have conquered will rise up against you. Every species you have enslaved will see that you can be hurt. And when the last Zirathi flag falls, the galaxy will remember that you were brought down by the primitives you tried to enslave. He let those words hang in the air for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a second data chip. This contains our counter-proposal, he said, holding it out to Varth. A treaty of non-aggression between Earth and the Zirathi Empire. We will not attack you. You will not attack us. We will trade and communicate as equals. And in time, perhaps we will even learn to trust each other. Vorath looked at the chip as if it were a poisonous snake. Take it back to your emperor, Daniel said. Let him see everything we have shown you. And let him decide whether his pride is worth the destruction of everything his ancestors built. He placed the chip on the console in front of Varth. You have 7 Earth days to give us your answer. If we do not hear from you, we will assume you have chosen war, and we will act accordingly. Daniel turned and began walking toward the exit. He could feel the eyes of every Zirathi in the chamber burning into his back. He half expected to feel the burn of a weapon blast between his shoulders at any moment, but no blast came. No guard moved to stop him. The Zirathi watched in stunned silence as the small human walked out of their chamber with his head held high when Daniel reached the hangar bay. The military officers were still waiting by the shuttle. They looked at him with desperate hope in their eyes. Well, one of them asked, "What happened?" Daniel climbed into the shuttle and strapped himself in. "I gave them something to think about," he said. "Now we wait and see if they are smart enough to listen." The shuttle lifted off and flew out of the massive warship. Behind them, the Dominion hung in Earth's sky like a dark cloud. But somehow, it seemed smaller now. Daniel looked back at it one last time. Then he closed his eyes and let out a long breath. The first battle had been won. But the war was far from over. The Dominion did not leave Earth's orbit. For 3 days, it hung in the sky like a sword waiting to fall. People around the world watched and waited. Some prayed, some panicked, and some began to lose hope. But Daniel Hart was not finished. On the morning of the fourth day, a message arrived from the Zirathi ship. High Ambassador Vorath demanded a second meeting. He claimed to have new terms to discuss. Daniel agreed without hesitation. This time, when he boarded the alien vessel, he brought something with him. It was a small device that looked like a simple earpiece, but inside it was a transmitter powerful enough to broadcast to every satellite orbiting Earth. The meeting would be watched by the entire world. Vorath waited in the same chamber as before. But this time, he was not alone. Dozens of high-ranking Zirathi officials filled the room. Military commanders in dark armor stood beside diplomats in flowing robes. Scientists with data tablets clustered in corners. And at the center of it all, displayed on a massive holographic screen, was a face that Daniel did not recognize, that it was older than Vorath, with scales that had faded to a dusty gray. Its eyes glowed with cold intelligence. A crown of metal and gemstones sat upon its head. "You stand before Emperor Zithos," Vorath announced, his voice filled with forced pride. "Ruler of the Zirathi Empire, master of 10,000 worlds. You will show proper respect." Daniel looked up at the enormous face on the screen. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He simply nodded his head once in acknowledgement. "Your Majesty," he said calmly. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. When he spoke, his voice was deep and ancient, like stones grinding together. "You are the human who threatened my empire." It was not a question. Daniel answered anyway. "I am Daniel Hart. I speak for the people of Earth, and yes, I delivered a warning to your ambassador about the consequences of attacking my world." "A warning," the Emperor repeated. "Some of my advisors call it a bluff. They say your species lacks the capability to harm us. They recommend that I burn your planet and end this matter today." Daniel felt his heart beating faster, but he kept his face calm. "And what do you think, Your Majesty?" The Emperor was silent for a long moment. His ancient eyes studied Daniel with an intensity that seemed to pierce through skin and bone. "I think," the Emperor said slowly, "that I have ruled this galaxy for 2,000 years. I have seen countless species rise and fall. I have learned to recognize danger when I see it. And when I look at you, human, I see something I have not seen in a very long time." "What is that?" Daniel asked. "I see a creature that is not afraid to die." The chamber fell silent. Daniel could feel the eyes of every Zirathi fixed upon him. He knew that this moment would decide the fate of billions. "You are correct," Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly through the great hall. "I am not afraid to die. Neither are the men and women aboard the 47 ships waiting in your territory. Neither are the 8 billion people on Earth who are watching this conversation right now." He touched the device in his ear, activating the broadcast. "We are not a species that surrenders. We never have been. Throughout our history, we have faced impossible odds and somehow survived. We have survived ice ages that covered our world in frozen death. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars against ourselves that nearly destroyed everything we built." He took a step forward, and his voice grew stronger. "We did not crawl out of the mud and reach for the stars just to kneel before you. We did not build our cities and create our art and dream our dreams just to become your slaves. We are small and young and primitive by your standards. But we are also stubborn and clever and absolutely unwilling to give up." Vorath stepped forward with anger on his face. "You dare to lecture the Emperor? You dare to speak to him as an equal? You are nothing but an insect, human, a pest to be crushed beneath our feet." Daniel turned to face the High Ambassador. "Then crush us. Go ahead. Order your fleets to burn Earth to ash. See what happens when you do." He pulled out a small communicator and held it up. "This device is connected to every one of our hidden ships. With a single word from me, they will begin their attacks. Your fleet staging areas will be destroyed. Your supply lines will be cut. Your Dyson collectors will suffer cascade failures that will take centuries to repair. By the time you finish destroying Earth, your empire will be crippled beyond recovery." He lowered the communicator but did not put it away. "And that is just what we can do today. Imagine what we will do tomorrow. You may kill every human on Earth, but you will not kill all of us. We have already sent colony ships to distant stars. We have hidden caches of technology and knowledge across the galaxy. Humanity will survive, and we will spend the rest of our existence hunting you down." The Emperor raised a clawed hand and Varth fell silent. The ancient ruler studied Daniel with new interest. "You would condemn your own world to destruction rather than submit to us?" the Emperor asked. "Yes," Daniel said without hesitation, "because submission would not save us. We have seen what you do to the species you conquer: slavery, execution, cultural erasure. Our children would be taken from us and forced to fight your wars. Our history would be erased and replaced with propaganda. Everything that makes us human would be stripped away until nothing remained but obedient tools for your empire." He shook his head. "Death would be kinder. At least in death, we would remain ourselves." The Emperor was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than threatening. "In 12,000 years, no species has ever spoken to me this way. Most beg for mercy. Some offer bribes. A few try to fight, but they never last long. You are the first to stand before me without fear and without hope, demanding to be treated as an equal." "I do have hope," Daniel corrected him. "I hope that you are wise enough to see that war between our species would benefit no one. I hope that you value your empire enough to avoid a conflict that would weaken it beyond repair. And I hope that somewhere beneath all those scales and claws, there is a rational being who can see the logic in peaceful coexistence." He stepped forward one final time, looking directly into the Emperor's ancient eyes. "But if I am wrong," Daniel said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm, "if you choose war over peace, if you decide that your pride is worth more than the lives of billions, then I want you to understand something with absolute clarity." He held up the communicator once more. "This will be your last mistake. The Zirathi Empire has stood for 12,000 years. If you attack Earth, it will not stand for 12,000 more. We will make sure of that, even if it costs us everything." The chamber was deathly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of Daniel's words hung in the air like a physical force. Then the Emperor did something that no one expected. He laughed out. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber and made the walls vibrate. The Zirathi officials looked at each other in confusion and alarm. Voreth's face went pale beneath his scales. "Remarkable," the Emperor said when his laughter finally faded. "Truly remarkable. In all my years, I have never encountered a species quite like yours. You are small and weak and hopelessly outmatched. And yet, you stand before me and make threats as if you were my equal." He leaned forward, his enormous face filling the holographic screen. "I could destroy you with a single command. I could wipe your world from existence and never think of you again. But I will not." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "Why?" The Emperor smiled, showing rows of ancient teeth. "Because I want to see what you become. Any species brave enough to stand up to the Zirathi Empire deserves the chance to prove itself. You have earned something no other species has ever earned from us, human." "What is that?" Daniel asked. "Our respect." Daniel let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Behind him on Earth, 8 billion people did the same. The first battle was over, and against all odds, humanity had won. The Dominion left Earth's orbit 3 hours after the meeting ended. It turned slowly in the darkness and activated its massive engines. Within minutes, it was nothing more than a bright point of light streaking toward the edge of the solar system. Within hours, it was gone. Daniel Hart watched it leave from the window of a military transport. He felt tired in a way that sleep could not fix. The weight of what he had done pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. He had saved humanity, at least for now. But he knew that the danger was far from over. When his transport landed at the United Nations complex in New York, a crowd of thousands was waiting for him. They cheered and waved flags from every nation on Earth. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Children held up signs with his name written in bright colors. Daniel walked through the crowd with a forced smile on his face. He shook hands and nodded at the cheering people. But his mind was already elsewhere, thinking about what came next. Inside the complex, he was met by a group of world leaders who had gathered to hear his report. The President of the United States was there, along with the Prime Ministers of several major nations and the Secretary General of the United Nations. They sat around a long table and watched Daniel with a mixture of hope and fear. The Zirathi have agreed to a temporary ceasefire, Daniel began. They will not attack Earth for now, but they have not agreed to our treaty proposal. Emperor Zitha said he wants to observe us before making a final decision. Observe us? The Secretary General asked. What does that mean? Daniel shook his head. I do not know exactly, but I believe they will be watching our every move for the foreseeable future. They want to see if we are truly as dangerous as we claim to be. The president leaned forward with concern on his face. And what happens if they decide we are not? Then they will attack, Daniel said simply. And everything I told them will be put to the test. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The bluff had worked for now. But eventually, the truth would have to catch up with them. The truth was complicated. Humanity did have 47 stealth ships positioned throughout Zirathi space. That part had been real. But the ships were not nearly as powerful as Daniel had claimed. They could cause significant damage, yes, but they could not cripple an empire of 10,000 worlds. Daniel had gambled on the Zirathi's fear of the unknown. He had presented the worst-case scenario and dared them to test it. And somehow, against all odds, the gamble had paid off. But it would not work twice. We need to build more ships, Daniel said. We need to make the threat real. If the Zirathi ever learn how weak we actually are, they will not hesitate to destroy us. The leaders nodded in agreement. Over the following months, Earth began the largest military buildup in human history. Factories that had made cars and appliances were converted to produce ship components. Scientists worked around the clock to improve weapon systems and engine designs. Recruitment centers opened in every major city, and millions of young people volunteered to serve. But humanity was not just building weapons. They were also reaching out to the stars in other ways. The data chip that Daniel had given the Zirathi contained another piece of information that he had not mentioned during the meeting. It contained encrypted messages offering alliance to every conquered species in the Empire. These messages promised support, weapons, and hope to anyone willing to stand against their masters. Within weeks, responses began arriving through hidden communication channels. The Keth Rebellion, which the Zirathi had tried so hard to suppress, suddenly gained new strength. Other species began organizing in secret, sharing information and resources. A resistance movement was taking shape across the galaxy, with Earth at its center, on the Zirathi homeworld. The mood was very different. High Ambassador Varath had been summoned before the Imperial Council to explain his failure. He stood in the great hall where emperors had ruled for millennia and faced the judgment of his peers. You allowed a primitive species to humiliate the Empire, one council member accused. You should have destroyed their envoy the moment he made his threats. If I had done that, we would now be at war, Varth replied. A war that would have cost us dearly, even if we eventually won. You cannot know that, another council member said. The humans may have been bluffing. May have been, Varth agreed. But are you willing to stake the future of our civilization on a guess? I was not. The council argued for hours. Some demanded immediate retaliation against Earth. Others urged caution. A few even suggested that the Emperor's decision to spare humanity had been correct, in the end. It was Emperor Zithos himself who ended the debate. The humans have shown us something we had forgotten, the ancient ruler declared. They have shown us that we can be challenged, that our power is not absolute, that even the smallest species can pose a threat if it is clever enough and brave enough. He rose from his throne and looked out at the gathered council members. For too long, we have grown comfortable in our dominance. We have become lazy and arrogant. We have stopped innovating because we believed we no longer needed to. And now a species barely out of its infancy has exploited our weaknesses and made us look like fools. His voice hardened. This will not happen again. I am ordering a complete restructuring of our military and intelligence services. We will purge our networks of human infiltration. We will develop new defenses against their stealth technology. And we will study them until we understand exactly what we are dealing with. He sat back down on his throne. The humans have earned a temporary reprieve. But that is all it is. Temporary. When we are ready, we will return to their world. And next time, there will be no negotiation. The council members nodded in grim agreement. The war had been postponed, but it had not been prevented. Both sides understood that a reckoning was coming. On Earth, Daniel Hart tried to return to his normal life. But there was no normal anymore. He was a hero now, the man who had faced down an empire and lived to tell about it. His face was on magazine covers and news broadcasts around the world. Schools were named after him. Children dressed up as him for Halloween. He hated every minute of it. I am not a hero, he told a reporter who asked how it felt to be the savior of humanity. I am just a man who got lucky. The real heroes are the people who built the ships and wrote the code and spent years preparing for a moment they hoped would never come. The reporter smiled and wrote down the quote. Daniel knew it would be printed alongside a heroic photograph of him looking determined and brave. The truth did not matter. People needed a symbol, and he had become one whether he wanted to or not. But even as the world celebrated, Daniel could not stop thinking about the future. The Zirathi were not gone. They were watching, waiting, planning, and sooner or later, they would make their move. He spent his nights staring at the stars, wondering how much time they had left, wondering if humanity would be ready when the storm finally came. He received his answer 3 months later, when a message arrived from the Keth sector. The rebellion had begun, and they were asking for Earth's help. Daniel read the message twice, then picked up his phone and made a call. It's happening, he said. The war is coming. We need to be ready. On the other end of the line, the Secretary General let out a long sigh. I was hoping we would have more time, she said. We never have as much time as we hope for, Daniel replied. But we work with what we have. That is what humans do. He hung up the phone and looked out at the night sky. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were counting on Earth for salvation. Somewhere out there, an ancient empire was preparing for vengeance, and somewhere in between, humanity was getting ready to fight for its place among the stars. The countdown had begun. 2 years had passed since Daniel Hart stood before the Zirathi Emperor and dared him to attack Earth. 2 years of frantic preparation, secret alliances, and sleepless nights. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Keth Rebellion had grown into a full-scale revolution. 3 species that had been enslaved for centuries now fought openly against their masters. Their worlds burned with the fires of war, and every day more joined their cause. The name of Earth spread through the conquered territories like a whispered prayer. The humans had shown that the Zirathi could be defied, and that single act of defiance had sparked a fire that would not be easily extinguished. Daniel Hard stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station above Earth. Through the massive windows, he could see dozens of warships being assembled in the vacuum of space. They were human ships, built with human hands and human ingenuity. Each one was faster, stronger, and more advanced than the vessels they had hidden in Zirathi space 2 years ago. Lavra Bennett stood beside him, her arms crossed as she watched the construction. She was the newly appointed Director of Interstellar Affairs, the government position that had been created specifically to deal with alien relations. She was young for such an important role, barely 40 years old, with sharp eyes and a quick mind. Daniel liked her immediately when they first met. "The Zirathi are building something," Lavra said, pulling up a holographic display from her tablet. "Our scouts in the outer sectors have been sending back images. A new class of warship, unlike anything we have seen before." Daniel studied the images. The ships were massive, bristling with weapons and armored with materials that his scientists had never encountered. They looked like predators designed for a single purpose: hunting down and destroying human vessels. "They are learning from their mistakes," Daniel said quietly. "Our stealth technology gave us an advantage. They are developing countermeasures." Lavra nodded. "Our analysts estimate they will be ready for deployment within 3 years. Maybe less if they push their production facilities to the limit. Then we have 3 years to be ready for them." Lavra was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more uncertain. "Can we win, Daniel? I mean, really win? Not just survive, but actually defeat them?" It was the question everyone was asking. The question Daniel had asked himself 1,000 times in the dark hours of the night. "I do not know," he admitted. "The Zirathi have ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They have resources we cannot match. They have experience we cannot replicate. On paper, we should have no chance against them." He turned to look at Laura, and she saw something in his eyes that surprised her. It was not fear or doubt. It was determination. "But we have something they do not have," Daniel continued. "We have the ability to change, to adapt, to grow. The Zirathi became powerful so long ago that they forgot how to improve. They stopped innovating because they believed they did not need to. They stopped learning because they thought they knew everything." He gestured toward the ships being built outside the window. "Look at what we have accomplished in 2 years. Ships that would have been impossible a decade ago. Alliances with species across the galaxy. A network of intelligence that reaches into the heart of the Empire itself. We did all of this while they were still trying to understand how we surprised them the first time." Lavra allowed herself a small smile. "You really believe we can do this?" "I believe we have no choice but to try. And I believe that when humans have no choice but to succeed, we find a way. We always have." A chime sounded from Laura's tablet. She looked down at it, and her expression changed. "There is a message coming in from the Keth sector. Priority 1. Daniel nodded. "Put it through." The holographic display shifted to show a face that was definitely not human. It belonged to a Keth, one of the species that had risen up against the Zirathi. The Keth were small creatures with gray skin and large dark eyes. They had 6 limbs and communicated through a combination of speech and gesture. This particular Keth was dressed in military uniform, and its expression was urgent. "Ambassador Hart," the Keth said through the translator. "I am Commander Vex of the Liberation Fleet. We have received intelligence that the Zirathi are planning a major offensive. They intend to crush our rebellion before it can spread further. We need Earth's help." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The moment when words would have to become action. "What do you need?" he asked. "Ships," Vex replied. "Weapons. Soldiers, if you can spare them. The Zirathi are sending a fleet of 300 warships to our sector. We have perhaps 50 vessels capable of fighting. Without reinforcement, we will be destroyed within days." Daniel looked at Lara. She was already doing calculations in her head. "We can send 40 ships," she said quietly. "Maybe 50 if we pull them from other sectors. But it will leave Earth vulnerable." "How vulnerable?" "If the Zirathi decide to attack while our fleet is away, we will have only our orbital defenses and a handful of patrol vessels. It would not be enough to stop them." Daniel closed his eyes. This was the choice he had dreaded since the day he walked off that Zirathi ship. Risk everything to help their allies, or protect themselves and watch their friends die. It was not really a choice at all. "Send the ships," Daniel said. "All 50 of them. And send me with them." Lara stared at him. "You, Daniel, you are not a soldier. You are a diplomat. I was a Marine before I was a diplomat. And right now, our allies need to see that Earth is willing to fight beside them, not just send weapons from a safe distance. If I am there, they will know we are committed." Lara wanted to argue. He could see it in her face. But she also knew he was right. "Fine," she said finally. "But you are taking a full security detail. And you are staying on the command ship, away from direct combat." "Agreed?" Daniel smiled. "Agreed." 3 weeks later, Daniel Hart stood on the bridge of the ESV Resilience as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Keth sector. Around him, 50 human warships emerged from the darkness like a pack of wolves arriving to defend their pack. The Keth fleet was waiting for them. 50 vessels of various sizes, battered from months of guerrilla warfare, but still ready to fight. Commander Vex's face appeared on the main screen. "Ambassador Hart, you came." Daniel nodded. "We made a promise. Humanity keeps its promises." For a moment, the alien commander seemed at a loss for words. Then Vex performed a gesture that the translator identified as a sign of deep respect. "Your people honor us. We will not forget this." The combined fleet moved into formation and began advancing toward the approaching Zirathi armada. 300 enemy ships against 100 allies. The odds were not good. But Daniel had faced worse odds before. As the two fleets drew closer, a communication signal came in from the Zirathi flagship. Daniel ordered it put through. The face that appeared on the screen was familiar. High Ambassador Varath, the same creature who had demanded Earth's surrender 2 years ago. He looked older now, more tired. The confidence that had once filled his eyes had been replaced with something harder and more bitter. "Ambassador Hart," Varath said, "I should have known you would be here. You cannot resist putting yourself in the middle of trouble." "Ambassador Varath," Daniel replied calmly, "I see you have been demoted from your previous position. I hope that is not my fault." Varath's eyes narrowed. "It cost me everything, human. My rank, my honor, my place in the Emperor's court. I have spent 2 years waiting for this moment. The moment when I finally get to watch your precious humanity burn." Daniel shook his head. "You still do not understand, do you? This is not about humanity anymore. Look at the fleet facing you. Humans, Keth, 3 other species who have joined our cause. This is not a rebellion. This is the beginning of a new order." He leaned forward, his eyes hard. "The Zirathi Empire is dying, Varath. It has been dying for centuries. You were just too proud to see it. We are simply helping the process along." Varath snarled. Bold words for a man who is about to die. "Attack formation. Destroy them all." The communication cut off. Around Daniel, Alarms began to sound as the Zirathi fleet opened fire. The Battle of the Keth sector had begun. It lasted for 6 hours. Ships exploded on both sides. Lives were lost by the thousands. Daniel watched from the bridge of the Resilience as heroes were made and sacrifices were given. He saw human vessels ram Zirathi warships to save Allied cruisers. He saw Keth fighters fly suicide missions into enemy command ships. He saw courage and desperation and fury like nothing he had ever witnessed. When it was over, the Zirathi fleet had been broken. 112 of their ships had been destroyed. The rest fled into the darkness, their will to fight shattered. The Allied fleet had lost 43 vessels, nearly half their number. But they had won. Daniel stood on the observation deck of the Resilience and looked out at the battlefield. Debris floated everywhere, the remains of ships and crews that had given everything for a chance at freedom. Behind him, Commander Vex appeared. "We won," the Keth said, wonder in its voice. "We actually won." Daniel nodded slowly. "This was just one battle. There will be many more. The Zirathi will not give up easily. But we proved something today," Vex said. "We proved that they can be